Elon Musk never mentioned her name, but when he accused a popular TV personality of silently killing careers, the internet went right to Rosie O'Donnell. What followed was anarchy. It began with a single phrase. No hashtags and no names. At 12:41 a.m., Elon Musk was seated in a dark room, live on stream, with a quiet and methodical voice. You'd be shocked how many Hollywood careers were derailed by individuals smiling on television. The conversation became crazy. He continued a few seconds later, saying that one of them had a talk program and pretended to aid people. Behind the scenes? A different tale. He grinned, hesitated, and then proceeded to discuss AI ethics as if he hadn't just put fuel on the fire. However, the internet did not move on. Within minutes, Reddit became active. Twitter threads are piled like dominoes. Users began picking clips and guessing names. Some went into rabbit holes. Others believed it was bait. But a pattern began to appear. Talk show presenter, influential in the early 2000s, opinionated, provocative, and sharp-tongued. Every indication pointed to Rosie O'Donnell. Keisha Lattimore, presenter of a tiny comedy podcast located in Phoenix, was in the middle of an episode when her producer slipped her a phone. She looked down, brows raised, and yelled into the microphone, "Hold up, Musk is talking about Rosie." That footage alone received 3 million views in 5 hours. The relationship was not even proven. However, Musk was well aware of his actions. He logged out after his 2-hour broadcast and said nothing further. There was no follow-up post or explanation, just quiet. But folks were not waiting. TikTok was inundated with side-by-side videos. Clips showing Rosie dismissing guests, former interns vaguely discussing a harsh work climate, and a resurrected monologue from her program in which she mocked cutting people off if they crossed the line. Was there comedy? Was it a confession? A former stand-up comedian called Gene Fairbanks shared a shaky video from a holiday in parking lot in Flagstaff. "Listen, I opened for Rosie once in 2001 in Los Angeles. She told me outright that if I continued to perform my set-like way, I would never make it. A week later, I lost 2 jobs. Coincidence? Maybe. What about now? I do not think so." The comments were divided. Some said Gene was reaching. Others said he had no incentive to lie. But the narrative continued to spread. And then something unusual occurred. Elon's following, which is often focused on technology, equities, or outer space, began going through Rosie's earlier interviews. They discovered clips that had not been touched in years. One from 2003 in which she said, "There are too many people in this business who want to be famous for nothing. I call when I need to." That phrase, "I call when I need to," it struck differently now. By daybreak, Rosie's name had trended in 14 nations. Elon still hadn't spoken her name once. Commentary channels on YouTube started airing live responses despite the lack of substantial proof. There was no direct allegation. It's just Musk's tone. He smirked. His time. And his massive reach. At 9:14 a.m., a video emerged with someone claiming to have worked as a segment organizer on Rosie's program. In it, Justine Hartwell, who now lives in Santa Fe, said she did not scream. She didn't toss anything. She did not need to. With one call from her, someone would be removed from the lineup. There's no explanation. I used to believe it was simply television politics. But some of the visitors never returned. Attend any concert. Nonetheless, there were defenders. On the same day, comedian Deshaun Minter made a reply video. "I don't care what Elon is insinuating. Rosie gave me my first break. Paid me even if the network didn't. Introduced me to agents who took me seriously. She was stern yet fair. The battle lines were forming. Fast." And then Elon made his first move after the stream. At 10:32 a.m. he tweeted that occasionally the mask slips, particularly when they believe no one is looking. No photograph. No video. Only those words. Under them was a fuzzy screenshot of what seemed to be a judicial settlement dated 2004. The names are redacted. One paragraph is highlighted. That is all it took. But it wasn't simply a rumor anymore. People sought evidence and Rosie was about to respond. Rosie did not have to wait long. By midday, her spokesperson had sent a short but sharp statement to Variety. Ms. O'Donnell will not tolerate vague, unfounded claims from millionaires seeking to divert the public from their own escalating crises. But it wasn't what made headlines. That happened later when Rosie herself went live. It was neither a rehearsed news conference or a polished Instagram video. It was raw. She was sitting alone in her kitchen in York, New York. She's wearing a hoodie, no makeup, and has a cup of coffee in front of her. The illumination was intense, but she didn't mind. "Let's get this straight," she remarked, peering directly into the lens. I've been in this profession for almost 30 years. I've made some folks angry. I've said things I regret, but I've never wrecked anyone's career. She took a breath, her voice shaking slightly to indicate that this wasn't simply damage control. I've seen Elon Musk's small feed and his cryptic little hints. Do you want to play detective? Go ahead. But bringing my name into a conspiracy fantasy? That is where I draw the line. It was hardly the typical Rosie rant. There was no joke, just irritation and anguish, the type that settles behind the eyes when someone feels betrayed, not by one person but by the whole world turning against them at once. Within minutes, live stream footage were everywhere. On Facebook, moms who grew up watching Rosie's daily program defended her strongly. She provided a forum for children with impairments, LGBTQ voices, and working mothers, according to one user. She wasn't flawless, but she did care. However, each defense elicited suspicious responses. Some cited Rosie's historical reputation in the business as acerbic, combative, and unafraid to damage bridges. Others were accorded such kindness. She's gaslighting all of us, one popular tweet said. Hollywood is full of folks who grin on television while stomping on others backstage. The tension rose even higher that evening when Rosie appeared on the Chat Hour, a famous podcast hosted by longtime friend and comic Brenda Kehoe. The program had been planned weeks in advance, and it was intended to be a lighthearted journey down memory lane. But once the cameras were rolling, the tone changed. Do you want to go there? Rosie inquired mid-interview, already preparing herself. Brenda nodded slowly. I believe you have to. Rosie sat back in her chair and crossed her arms. Look, I'm not going to claim that I was easy to deal with. I had standards. I faced pressure from network executives, advertisers, and viewers. I turned down several folks. Some of them did not enjoy it. Some undoubtedly still don't. Brenda cocked her head. But have you blacklisted anyone? Rosie glanced away. For the first time that day, her voice fell. I'm not sure what you name it. If someone was toxic or unprofessional and I suspected they would be an issue for the team, I may have called. Perhaps I was mistaken a couple times. But I didn't intend to destroy anyone's life. That single footage, if I was mistaken a few times, was chopped, manipulated, slowed down, and played millions of times on TikTok and YouTube. People froze it in time. They created whole tales around it. And with that, the question moved from did she to whom? By 8 p.m., gossip sites started compiling the names of lesser-known comedians, stage performers, and authors whose careers had ended in the 2000s. Although no one had any public links to Rosie, the internet was drawing the dots. Some are genuine, while others are entirely made up. The pressure increased on both sides. Musk hadn't shared anything else since the hazy settlement document. However, Rosie's podcast clip was suddenly making national headlines. CNN aired a 2-minute piece on the dispute. One guest referred to it as a modern-day witch hunt, while another said that it is about responsibility rather than rejecting culture. As the topic changed from gossip to morals, from rumor to reckoning, Rosie's stillness returned. There were no tweets, follow-ups, likes, or retweets. She had spoken her thing, but the audience wasn't finished listening. But beneath the cacophony and video, more voices began to emerge, including individuals who had been in the room when Rosie made those calls. The following wave did not come from Elon. It did not come from Rosie either. It came from folks the internet hadn't heard from in years, including former workers, assistants, backstage crew, and comedians who had been working since the early 2000s but never quite made it. The first name that appeared on Reddit was Vince Drayton. He wasn't renowned or viral, yet some people remembered him. He had performed a few late-night shows in 2002 as well as warm-up engagements for studio audiences before disappearing. Vince has never publicly discussed his experience in Hollywood until today. Vince peered directly into his phone camera in a 12-minute YouTube video recorded from his Fresno one-bedroom apartment. I'm not sure whether Elon is giving the full truth, he replied, massaging the back of his neck. But I can tell you something. I had a development contract. NBC. I was 26. One of Rosie's producers came to see me perform at the Laugh Stop in West Hollywood. The next day, I'm summoned into an office. My program idea has been put on hold, according to my sources. There's no explanation. A week later, another comedian, much less experienced, receives the green light for a program almost similar to mine. I discover that she has been on Rosie's program twice. He hesitated. I'm not claiming Rosie directly made the call, but the timing? It was quite handy. The video had barely 14,000 views in the first 24 hours. However, it lighted a fuse. Other names began to arise. A lady called Janine Cardoza, who worked on Rosie's program for 2 summers during college, released a TikTok titled, "I used to love her. Then I worked there." Janine did not accuse Rosie of shouting or physical abuse. She described something quieter and more caustic. She would make fun about visitors that flopped during commercial breaks, calling them names and saying things like, "They'll never come back." It was amusing. Until it was not. They really did not return. Ever. The comments came in with some complimenting Janine for her honesty and others condemning her of clout chasing. However, her tone was different. It was not furious. It was disappointing. Like someone who used to adore Rosie but now couldn't make sense of what she'd witnessed. However, not everyone was critical. Mel Trainor, a segment producer who worked with Rosie from 1998 to 2002, shared a contrasting perspective in an Instagram Live. She was tough without a question, but she battled for those who were left out. She campaigned for LGBT voices on television when no one else would. She got into shouting bouts with network executives about it. Don't remove everything simply because Elon Musk wants a diversion. Mel's voice cracked towards the end. I saw her fighting. I noticed her crying in her dressing room. She didn't always get things right, but she wasn't a monster. The comments were split again. Some people believe both ideas might be true. Rosie was kind with some but brutal with others. She had favorites. That she may not have realized the influence she had off camera. Then followed something that completely shifted the tone. An anonymous email was released to the Daily Register, a medium-sized publication situated in Tempe, Arizona. It claimed to be from a writer's assistant who had temporarily worked on a comedy that Rosie executive produced in 2006. The email mentioned an occasion in which Rosie reportedly asked that a guest star be removed from an episode because she was not humorous enough and contributed nothing to the show. The actress, who was 23 at the time, was replaced. Following that, her career halted. The email finished with, "She did not scream or curse, but her word was final." The studio in issue did not confirm or refute the report, but web investigators soon identified the program and actress. Once again, Rosie issued no formal denial. The image gradually became one of a pattern rather than a single explosive event. Subtle, incisive, and effective. Not loud cruelty. Quiet control. But just as the public began to accept their version of the facts, Elon made another move. And this time it was more difficult to ignore. 2 days after Rosie's webcast and the constant inflow of testimonies, Elon broke his silence. It wasn't a dramatic thread or an ongoing diatribe. Only one post, time 3:17 a.m. from his former account. Some individuals create empires. Others create quiet. You choose which is more risky. There was no meme or joke attached, just a snapshot. A clipped picture of a legal document with all but one line blacked out. In appreciation of the mutual agreement to avoid litigation, the respondent undertakes not to seek any future media possibilities related to the 2001 event or its professional consequences. No names, no places. But Musk's supporters were already on board. Within hours, the hashtag Rosie agreement began trending. People dredged out old articles, hazy PDFs, and chatroom transcripts from comic message boards in the early 2000s. Theories multiplied. Theories were transformed into evidence in the court of public opinion. A user entitled Throwback Comedy shared side-by-side screenshots. Kelly Braun, a lesser-known actress, disappeared from the limelight about 2001. Another example comes from a 2005 blog post in which she claimed being immediately banned after an unsuccessful guest appearance on a daytime talk program. People assembled the parts whether they belonged or not. But Elon wasn't finished. Later that afternoon, he tweeted again, this time referring to a YouTube video titled The Joke That Got Her Cut. The movie included a 40-second clip from an unaired rehearsal for a midday program in 2000. The lady on stage was young, anxious, and obviously trying too hard. She made a joke that didn't work. The camera instantly went to Rosie, who could be heard yelling, "Jesus, get her off the set." The video has never broadcast. According to reports, the original file was part of an internal network archive that has now been disclosed. They couldn't believe it. The voice sounded like Rosie, but there was no formal confirmation, date stamp, or context. Still, for many, it seemed like the last nail. Commentators on YouTube stopped the clip when Rosie's voice appeared, repeating it with subtitles such as "cold-blooded" or "there it is." Backlash grew quickly. Brands that had worked with Rosie in previous years, such as charity collaborations, voiceover commercials, and nostalgia specials, started deleting references to her from their websites. One charity, who recognized her in 2019 for her advocacy efforts, secretly removed her name off their website. However, several individuals remain skeptical. Ana Reyes, a tech journalist, organized a Twitter Space conversation that directly addressed why now. "This isn't about justice," she said. "It is about deflection." Elon Musk is under heat for the harassment cases at X and the price slide at Tesla, and now he's shifting the focus to someone else. Why? Because it works. And she wasn't the only one who questioned the purpose. Elon's opponents referred to him as a chaos dealer, someone who feeds on diversion and controversy. Others accused him of targeting women, particularly elderly female public figures who formerly had influence but are now easier to bring down. But Elon had already changed gears again. Later that evening, he appeared on the Logan Shaw program, a very famous live talk program that broadcasts from Austin, Texas. When Logan mentioned the Rosie controversy, Elon leaned forward and grinned as if it were all just intriguing information. "I am not saying anything," he said. "I'm only putting facts out there. People may make their own decisions. Perhaps this is a wake-up call, perhaps it is just show business." That final statement, which may simply be entertainment, prompted another avalanche. Because to many people it sounded like code. It was a reminder of how many secrets had been buried throughout the years using the same rationale. Rosie's crew remained silent. She didn't go live, didn't publish anything. For once, the quiet came from Rosie herself, not her detractors. And the quiet made the sounds louder. But the internet hadn't seen everything yet, since a tape from the past was about to turn the narrative on its head. The leak did not come from a journalist or a confirmed insider. It came from Ronnie Gaskin, a podcast archivist in Wichita Falls who spends the majority of his spare time scanning old VHS tapes and distributing them to Talk T-Vault, a niche YouTube channel. Ronnie wasn't attempting to create controversy. He didn't even know about the Musk-Rosie dispute until a customer messaged him, "Dude, check tape number 141. There's a video of Rosie discussing backstage about an actress." Ronnie checked, and there it was. Rosie is shown in a backstage scene from 1999, sitting in a cosmetics chair with her hair pulled back and casually conversing with a small team. The microphone is hot. The camera was slightly turned toward the sign, which obviously was not meant for transmission. Someone discusses a new actress who appears on a show that Rosie executive produced. Rosie chuckles. "Oh, her? Please. She botched the table read. I instructed Greg to pull her. She's not prepared. To be honest, she's quite obnoxious." One of the employees off camera laughs uncomfortably. Rosie continues. "If she's wise, she'll go back to waiting tables. LA sucks up females like that." The video quality is poor. The sound cracks. But it is clearly her voice. There's no mistaking the rhythm, tone, or incisive delivery. The video lasted roughly 30 seconds. However, within an hour, it had spread everywhere. TikTok's developers examined every phrase. Twitter boiled over. Some said it was a prank. Just Rosie being Rosie. Blunt and snarky as usual. Others thought it corroborated what Musk had implied. That it wasn't about a single occurrence. It was a pattern. An attitude. A power trip. Carson Mayfield, the late-night presenter, presented the tape during his monologue, raising an eyebrow. "I guess Rosie was performing HR stuff before HR existed. Rough stuff." However, the session did not finish with laughter. Carson was dead serious when he stated, "You can't call yourself a mentor while kicking people down behind closed doors." The strain became overwhelming. News sites carried headlines such as, "Was Rosie O'Donnell the queenmaker or the executioner?" Comment sections are rife with disputes. Some blame the industry for tolerating such conduct for decades. Others defended Rosie for doing what they said every Hollywood executive did but never faced consequences for. A message emerged in the midst of the storm. Quiet. Unverified. But it's difficult to ignore. An anonymous person left a remark on Reddit. "My sister was the actress about whom Rosie made jokes. She returned home weeping. She did not work on television again after that. That joke really wrecked her here." No names were supplied. No additional posts arrived. But it persisted. It was realistic. And for many, it was the last straw. In less than 24 hours, the podcast where Ronnie submitted the tape, which was only known a few days before, had over 1 million views. News crews arrived outside his little Texas house. He did not answer the door. A scribbled notice pinned to his window said, "Not doing interviews. I just submitted what was already on tape." Meanwhile, Rosie had still not answered. Some admirers asked her to talk. Others advised her to vanish for a time. One person said, "Don't say anything. You'll simply make things worse." Brand began to openly break relationships. A reunion program she was supposed to shoot in Boston has been put on hold indefinitely. A college had asked her to speak at a spring event and then secretly replaced her with a lesser-known author. Her quiet online turned into a void. In that vacuum, additional reports emerged, including purported statements, practice room interactions, and disparaging remarks. Not everything was confirmed. Certain reports were conflicting, but the trend was too persistent to ignore. Despite this, some individuals continued to ask other questions. If Musk really cared about justice, why would he disclose this now? Was this about Rosie, or was Musk demonstrating that he could still bend the internet with a single smirk? But before anybody could respond, one voice rose. Someone who had been quiet for 2 decades and claimed to know the whole tale. Dawn Leffridge was formerly considered one of Rosie's closest buddies. Dawn worked as a writer and segment developer for the Rosie O'Donnell show in 2000, and she was recognized internally as someone Rosie could rely on. The two had been seen together at charity events, cited side by side in magazine articles, and even taken family vacations to Palm Springs. Dawn suddenly quit the business in 2003. No public explanation, no interviews. She just vanished from the scene. That changed when Dawn wrote a pun-filled 200-word op-ed for a tiny but respected digital outlet called Lines Between, titled "Working with Rosie was the best and worst experience of my career." Dawn didn't choose a side. She did not attack. She didn't make an excuse. She spoke the truth, at least her version of it. Rosie was clever and witty in a manner that you could not teach. She brightened up a room, expected greatness, and provided me with chances I never imagined possible. But she was also keen, and when she used that sharpness on you, it hurt deeply. Dawn characterized the behind-the-scenes environment as high-pressure and tension-filled, with Rosie constantly in the center. She described hard hours revising scripts, guests being bumped at the last minute, and an overall sense of worry, fear of saying the wrong thing, failing Rosie, or being replaced. She did not accuse Rosie of any particular harsh act, but she did build a picture of someone who was unaware of or unconcerned about her authority. Rosie wasn't wicked, but she didn't always see the harm she caused in her desire of power, and the rest of us were too terrified or devoted to speak out. The op-ed circulated quickly. It did not vilify Rosie, nor did it protect her. It was balanced, honest, and in an online argument full of yelling, it seemed calm and genuine. People who had previously taken harsh views started to soften. Even on Elon's side, support began to crumble. Critics noted that Musk had not disclosed anything new. He had increased rumors, certainly, but had he really revealed some terrible truth, or had he merely weaponized popular perception? An X-thread by journalist Ty Franklin lays it out well. Elon is not the hero here. He did not break a story, he created uproar. He stirred the soup just enough to make it boil over, and he did so to obscure his own headlines. That doesn't absolve Rosie, but we shouldn't proclaim him the truth-teller either. People listened because, while Rosie's image suffered, Elon's motives were now being scrutinized as well. He had served as the catalyst a week before. Now he was the manipulator. People started to wonder, is it justice if it comes from someone with an agenda? Jordana Ziegler, a cultural critic on Talk News Tonight, expressed it best. What we're witnessing is not accountability, but chess. Billionaire chess. And Rosie is simply a very public pawn. Nonetheless, Rosie's quiet lingered. Some suspected that she was contacting legal advice. Others thought she was in shock. Some speculated she would never return to public life at all. Despite the hubbub, a calmer debate was taking form. One on organizational culture, power dynamics, and the ambiguous line between forceful leadership and destructive conduct. People started to share their own tales. A former casting assistant said on Facebook, "I've worked for women like Rosie. Brilliant, focused, but cruel. I'm not condoning it, but maybe we should stop establishing cultures based on fear and calling it ambition." That statement was taken up by news organizations, podcasts, and think tanks. The emphasis changed from scandal to structure, from one woman's actions to the system that enabled them. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Rosie was not an outlier. She was a symptom. But even as the discourse expanded, one more twist awaited. Someone Rosie had once helped rise felt obligated to speak out, not in anger, but in truth. He hadn't spoken in years, not publicly or on record. However, when Elias Garin, a now famous screenwriter and Emmy winner, released a 7-minute video from his Santa Rosa home, it was received differently. Not because he came to defend Rosie or to oppose Elon, but because, for the first time, someone who had personally profited from Rosie's influence was willing to tell the whole tale. Elias reclined on a worn-out leather sofa, spectacles slightly misaligned but his speech serene. I met Rosie in 1997 at a benefit in San Diego, he said. I was working 2 jobs, sleeping on sofas and attempting to break into TV. She read a sketch I had written, laughed, and gave me her contact information. A month later, I was in New York offering ideas for her set. He halted, hands on his knees. She gave me a chance, and for a time I assumed that meant she was untouchable, generous, smart, terrifying as hell, but untouchable. But then his voice lowered, slower and more deliberate. One day I suggested a section that she didn't like. There was no major explosion. She simply stopped speaking to me. No more meetings. My emails remained unanswered. My name vanished from the credits. I never received a reason. Elias looked squarely at the camera. Rosie built me up before erasing me. I don't think she wanted to destroy me, but I believe she forgot that people like me aren't built of steel. We were built from hope. The video finished with one line. People are not like puzzles that you can set down when you're bored. That phrase was a hit. Hard. Because it did not shout. It did not accuse. It spoke to something deeper. How quickly powerful individuals, especially those with good intentions, lose sight of the importance of their words, choices, and silence. Rosie's quiet was ultimately broken the following day. A typed statement. No video. No podcast. Just one paragraph forwarded to a few big media sites, then republished in full. I've read the tales, heard the voices, and I'm not going to pretend it doesn't hurt. I never intended to damage anybody, but I understand that my actions, whether deliberate or not, had effects. I was a product of a system that valued supremacy, and I played the game to survive. I apologize to those I have harmed. I will not make excuses. I can only listen, reflect, and strive to do better with the time I have left in this field. It was not a confession. It was not a complete apology. But there was something. Human. Imperfect. Honest. The reception was mixed as predicted. Some said it was too little too late. Others saw it as the first grown-up moment amid a sea of turmoil. However, when the media cycle slowed, the fundamental concerns persisted. Who gets to define harm? Who determines whether a strong someone has changed sufficiently to be accepted back? Is there atonement in an industry that thrives on blame but seldom accepts grace? Musk never replied to Rosie's remarks. Within days, he had moved on to the next scandal. What about government monitoring and AI regulation? Rosie's name vanished from his stream completely. Because he never took it personally. Just another domino. Another fire to start. But for everyone else, for the individuals Rosie helped, the ones she ignored, and the ones she damaged, the moment remained. It stuck with Elias, who continues to compose while mentoring young creatives who feel unheard. It remained with Dawn Lethbridge, who wrote in a follow-up article that the industry would change only if those in positions of power understand they were not born powerful. It stuck with viewers not as a scandal, but as a reminder that every public person has a private story. Messy. Complicated. Sometimes kind. Sometimes brutal. What's the moral? Power does not necessarily corrupt, rather it always discloses. And in a society that is always watching, how you treat people when no one is looking may be the loudest thing you ever say. Subscribe if you think that the truth isn't always loud, but it always makes its way to the surface.